Welcome, seekers of hidden knowledge, to the mystical realm of the occult. Delve into the secrets of the universe as we journey together into the enigmatic world of ancient wisdom. Brought to you by your guide through the shadows of enlightenment, Wisdom Rocker. Uncover the mysteries, unlock the power, and journey with us as we explore the hidden depths within the pages of forgotten scrolls and ancient texts. Prepare to embark on a journey beyond the ordinary, where wisdom transcends time and knowledge is your greatest ally. Welcome to Wisdom Rocker. Prepare to awaken your inner sage. In this video, we will be uncovering the wisdom within the chapters of
The Theosophical Seal, a study for the student and the non-student, by Arthur M. Kuhn, with an introduction by James S. Perkins. This book is dedicated to all searchers for wisdom. 1958. Book 4. The Serpent. Chapter 13. Myth and Sacred Scripture. The serpent swallowing its tail surrounds and encloses all the other symbols in the Theosophical Seal. It is perhaps the most mysterious and elusive of all the figures which make up the seal. We shall agree, I think, as we go on, that this is true. There are two distinctly separate aspects to this serpent symbol. One is the serpent itself, mysterious, elusive, subtle, provocative, challenging. The other idea arises from its form or shape on the seal, coiled in a circle, and in the act of swallowing its own tail. An impossibility, and yet it happens, and has happened continuously, as we shall see, throughout the universe of time and space. This aspect will be held for the final chapter. Meanwhile, we shall attempt to follow the serpent in its many fascinating ramifications. All the individual figures which go to make up the Theosophical Seal, with the one exception of the serpent, seem to be endowed with, or at least to express certain definite deific attributes or universal qualities. Each represents, if we may recapitulate for a moment, a certain aspect of deity, some phase of God in manifestation. The point, which has no dimension, represents God as spirit, the Father or the first Logos. The line, both the horizontal and the vertical, would indicate the dual aspect of God in manifestation, spirit, matter, life form, Father, Mother. This is portrayed in the cross as the divine sacrifice, God incarnate, the Word made flesh, the Son, or the second Logos. The Tau is the symbol of man's path of return to God. The swastika is the whirling fire of spirit in his creative aspect as the Holy Ghost, or the third Logos. In the interlaced triangles is typed God as a triune being and man in his image and likeness. The serpent symbol descends from this high realm of divine contemplation. Instead of pointing to those deific qualities, whether human or universal, it brings to mind just the reverse. From a classic heaven of law, order, and harmony, we have descended into a world of confusion, struggle, chaos. A new element has crept into the sublime atmosphere of the gods, the element of inquiry and doubt, inquiry after the sources of truth and doubt concerning all authority. With the entrance of the serpent, order and beauty have given way to human passions, desires, greeds, ambitions, selfish loves, and hates. The simple laws of being have become complex and complicated problems, and man has invented strange theologies to attempt to solve and to escape from them. Such words as sin, evil, punishment, hell, redemption, and salvation have entered into the human vocabulary to bind men's hearts and minds in fear and ignorance. And yet, in the face of this anti-spiritual influence, which through the ages has been attributed to the serpent, we shall find that it holds a very definite and important place in mankind's evolution, in the whole universe for that matter. In spite of the blame and recriminations which have been heaped upon it for everything which is wrong with humanity and the world, and in spite of all the evil that has popularly been believed about it since the temptation of Eve in the Garden of Eden, there is evidence, we believe, to prove that the serpent as a symbol contains allusions to truth so deeply occult as to deserve our profoundest study. View what incredible perversion of human logic has man succeeded in devising a doctrine which purports to place the cause of his original fall and the entire blame for his subsequent propensity for evil doing upon this creature which crawls in the dust. Around it have been woven more myth and fable, and in our own enlightened age more religious dogmas than about any other symbol. The serpent is nevertheless of all figures invented by the fathers of our race the one most appropriate for preserving for posterity the deeper meanings of the eternal struggles going on within the human mind between his lower and higher natures. Of all symbols, this is said to be the most mystical, and like Satan, who is regarded as its personification, the least understood. The serpent winds its way through myth and sacred scriptures of all peoples and of all ages. Throughout, the serpent and the dragon seem to have been used interchangeably. Where one word is used, the other could be substituted in many instances without altering the meaning. Our thoughts naturally turn to classic literature, to the myths of Greece, Rome, Egypt, Chaldea, India, and China for the many examples which come to mind. We have read stories in high school textbooks without realizing that they weave a story fundamental to man's physical and spiritual evolution. With no thought of any inner or esoteric meaning, these myths become meaningless fairy tales. We instinctively think that way. Back in time, before history began, there were those wise men, elders of our race, who devised these nature symbols and allegories in order to teach subtly infant humanity the truths of man's own physical and spiritual nature. The more so is this thought impressed upon our minds when we find the sameness of pattern in the myths of all peoples, included among them the Hebraic legends recorded in the Old and New Testaments, often mistakenly regarded as history. Perhaps the most outstanding example of this similarity may be found in the cases of the golden apples of Hesperides and of the fruit from the tree in the midst of the Garden of Eden. The former were guarded by a 100-headed dragon. The story is recounted as the 11th labor of Hercules. It seems that Hercules, born of a divine father and an earthly mother, must slay this dragon before he could possess the golden apples of divinity. The sacred garden, the forbidden fruit, the serpent or dragon placed in the garden as guardian over the coveted fruit, the theft of the fruit by a mortal having a divine father. These are some of the paralleling aspects of the two stories, fairly soliciting an impartial and comparative study of their subtler meanings. Another of the myths of Grecian origin which expresses the guardian idea was that of the sleepless dragon which watched over the golden fleece. It was necessary for Jason to subdue this dragon before he could procure the golden fleece. We are reminded of the slayings of dragons by the knights of King Arthur in their search for the Holy Grail, or of the heroes Sigmund, Beowulf, Sigurd, etc. in northern mythology. The dragon would seem to type man's lower animal nature, while the golden fleece, Holy Grail, etc. would symbolize his soul or divine nature. The story is told of the infant Hercules and his twin brother Iphicles. It seems that Amphitrion's wife had twins. One was his own, and the other the son of Zeus. Amphitryon was jealous and wished to learn which of the boys was his own and which had a divine father, so he placed 2 serpents in the crib. Iphicles fled. Hercules strangled the 2 serpents. The student will find a situation here paralleling the Bible story of Jacob and Esau. These latter were twins. Esau was his father's firstborn, while Jacob typed the divine lineage. Jacob acquired the birthright of his brother Esau and his father's blessing. We might see in one the physical vehicle body, while in the other the reincarnating soul, the divine ego. One is born of an earthly mother, the other of a divine father. It is only the divine nature that can conquer and control the lower serpent forces. Early in the history of the earth, the great python came up out of the mire and swamp and spread evil and pestilence over the land. Apollo, son of Zeus, came down to earth and slew the serpent, restoring light and health to mortals. He is known as God of the Sun. In the Egyptian version of this hierogram, Typhon slew Osiris, god of the sun, and cut his body into 14 pieces and scattered them over the land. Horus, Osiris' son, came to earth and slew the serpent Typhon, and after restoring his father's body, became the god of the sun. The parallelism between these myths and certain aspects of Christian theology can hardly be overlooked. Jesus, the divine Son, came to earth to destroy the power of the dragon. One could go on indefinitely through these ancient myths to find the serpent or dragon as typing the forces of evil and obstruction. And yet there are other aspects of this serpent glyph which suggest many layers of interpretation. Albert Pike, in his book on Masonic symbolism, morals, and dogma, gives considerable evidence which shows that the serpent held a significant place in the mystery schools of the ancient world. Pluto, god of the underworld, was represented as seated on a serpent, as was Serapis of Egypt. The sacred basilisk was the royal ensign of the pharaohs. In the temple of Osiris there is a tablet on which is represented a basilisk erect with horns on its head and between the horns a disc. The serpent in connection with a disc or globe is found upon monuments of many nations. Aesculapius, son of Apollo, was the god of medicine and healing. He is pictured as carrying a club-like staff with a serpent symbol of renovation coiled around it. Serpent figured prominently in the mysteries of Bacchus and of Eleusis. In Egypt, the serpent used in its mysteries when extended meant divine wisdom, with its tail in its mouth signified eternity. The Celtic Druids built their temples of huge stones arranged in the form of a serpent. These temples were originally called cirques or kirks, meaning circles, the word being forerunner of the Kirk Church. In the zodiac of the heavens, the serpent holds a prominent place among the circle of animals. The northern constellation of Draco, like a river winding through the wintry bear, girdles the universe. Even as in Egyptian hieroglyphics, the serpent encircles the mundane egg. In Hindu mythology, the king of evil demons was called Naga, king of serpents. We may trace in this word the Hebrew word nachash, meaning serpent. The Encyclopaedia Britannica adds corroboration to these evidences from many sources. It claims that the similarity of the Northern European and the Oriental snake myths seems to point to some common origin in an antiquity too remote to be explored. The dragon has been for unknown ages the national symbol of the Chinese people and plays an important part in Chinese art. These unusual dragon symbols represent powers of the air and type the deified forces of nature of the Taoist religion. The serpent in folklore arises from every corner of the globe, from the New World as well as the Old, and it is often difficult for scholars to separate superstition from myth, the latter being built around pure symbolism. The serpent tradition flows out of every type and class of people in its arts, its religion, its superstitions, and its magic rites. Familiar in custom and legend are the healing powers of the serpent, and in many countries, especially in Greece and Egypt, the serpent has been a symbol of the healing art. We are particularly interested in the serpent lore which we find in our own scriptures. In referring to certain of the Bible stories as myths, there is intended no irreverence to the sacredness of their source, for while a myth may have no basis in history, its very nature and purpose is to reveal to man truths too profound for him to grasp in their naked purity. Jesus himself used this method in teaching his many followers. It is said that without a parable spake he not unto them. In the Bible, the serpent makes his appearance on the scene at the beginning of the 3rd chapter of Genesis, immediately following the story of creation. His manner of entrance has been one of the stumbling blocks in the way of the rational thinker in accepting Christian theology based upon the fall of man. For the idea of a serpent holding conversation with our first parents upon the consequences of eating the fruit forbidden by their maker strikes all rationalists as being so ridiculous as to brand the rest of the creation story as equally fantastic. It is, however, the opinion of many scholars that the entire creation story, including the snake episode, was not original with Moses, but was a revision of much earlier traditions handed down from Babylonian sources, being themselves repetitions of more ancient Sumerian traditions. Mystic and occult scholars hold that the whole story is a glyph wherein is portrayed a cosmic formula of creation. Be that as it may, the rationalists are quick to admit that the serpent expressed a subtle bit of wisdom when he said, "God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Wise old serpent. When Moses was preparing to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, the Lord gave him and his brother Aaron a magic trick with which to convince the Pharaoh that the God of Moses was the true God. Aaron was to cast his rod upon the ground, and it would instantly become a serpent. The Pharaoh, not wishing to be outdone, called his magicians and commanded them to do the same, which they did, and the magicians' rods became serpents also. But behold, Aaron's rod swallowed up the magicians' rods. Then there is the amazing account of the serpent of brass, which Moses placed upon a pole for the people who had been bitten by snakes to look at. It is said that those who did look were healed of their poison. The exit of the serpent from the pages of the Bible is as dramatic, if not as romantic, as its entrance. Let the words of the author of the Revelation tell of its tragic ending, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. And behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And there was a war in heaven, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And when the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and to make war with the remnant of her seed. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit. It would seem that the woman had finally caught up with the serpent of Eden. Chapter 14. Symbol of evil. With very few exceptions, the serpent, both in mythology and in sacred scriptures, brings to mind the idea of adversity, pestilence, famine, sin, sorrow, suffering, and death. The serpent itself is supposed to be crafty, sly, cunning, subtle, enticing, deceitful, and poisonous, and has been termed the tempter, the obstructor, the destroyer, the angel of death and of the bottomless pit. From him there exudes an influence which is noxious, noisome, harmful, unwholesome, corrupt, and pernicious. In other words, he is the epitome of evil. While it is not our purpose to pass over lightly the subject of evil, or to make apologies to the serpent for that matter for his association with evil, we do want to try to apply some straight thinking both to the serpent and the evil of which he is the symbol. We see the results of evil all around us: misery, unhappiness, poverty, fear, hate, wretchedness, and ugliness in its many forms. But what is evil in itself, and what is its cause? Are good and evil relative terms, or is evil fixed and non-variable and not affected by time, place, or circumstance? Is its presence in the world the responsibility of an evil one variously called the devil and Satan? Is sin inherited by the human race like some dread disease from our first parents? Is it true that mankind is under a curse from which there is no escape save by some form of blood sacrifice? In our endeavor to bring some clear thought to these problems, we wish to avoid involvement in any of the theologies regarding sin, condemnation, repentance, forgiveness, and salvation. These problems are the province of religions. Our role is strictly that of an investigator, a searcher for truth. In presuming to furnish answers to these questions, we feel that we are somewhat in the position of those individuals of dubious mentality who rush in where angels fear to tread. The problem of evil has been the subject of ecclesiastical debate for centuries. Philosophies, psychologies, and theologies have been built around it. The answers to the question, what is evil, have been legion. St. Paul, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Freud, Mary Baker Eddy, and countless others have grappled with it. He would be egotistical indeed who thought to cover in a few paragraphs what prophets and poets from Moses and Job to Dante and Milton have written volumes about, and upon which annually millions of sermons are preached in churches and synagogues throughout the world. Another point must be touched on before entering into a discussion of so controversial a subject as the problem of evil. It should be made clear that, although the subject matter grows out of a consideration of the serpent which forms part of the Theosophical Seal, the opinions expressed herein are those of the author and are in no way to be considered as doctrines of the Theosophical Society. The Society has many teachings but only one creed, if we may use that term, the creed of universal brotherhood. Yet, while accepting full responsibility for the conclusions arrived at, humble acknowledgement is given to those sages and teachers whose writings have been a storehouse of source material. We have suggested that as a symbol the serpent refers to our human rather than to our divine qualities. In a sense, then, man partakes of the curse placed upon the serpent for his divine part or spirit, identifying itself with that part of him which is of the earth is thus condemned. And to live in an animal body and share its laws and conflicts. It would seem, therefore, at first glance, that evil made its appearance in the world as a result of this conflict between the laws of the spirit and those of the flesh. Indeed, our earliest record of primitive peoples establishes the fact that their idea of evil had its roots in a belief, common to all, in the duality in nature. Primitive man saw everywhere about him a conflict to the death between two opposing forces. One was benevolent, good warmth, sunshine, spring, summer, gentle rain, food, shelter, health, etc. The other force was malefic, evil, cold, darkness, winter, storm, flood, famine, disease, war, and death. He saw himself as the victim caught between these two forces, and his heart was filled with a dread fear of the unknown. Not knowing their source, he personified these forces as good and evil spirits and sought by rites, sacrifices, and gifts to propitiate the one and appease the other. The idea of two opposing principles or causes in nature, having different natures and opposite in their effects, one producing light and good and the other darkness and evil, is seen as one of the principal bases of every religion. There has thus been established the dogma of two opposing principles in nature, which contrary to each other produce in man the mixture of good and evil. Out of this tradition of two opposing forces in the universe, there has naturally arisen the idea of two opposing beings of equal or nearly equal power, one benevolent and the other malevolent. To what extent this tradition has filtered into and has become part of our current religious beliefs requires no proof. True, we recite our creed declaring our belief in the one God, the maker of heaven and earth. But then, with a definite reservation, we modify this omnipotence and force him to relinquish part of his power and authority to a rival, whose avowed purpose is the obstructing and undoing of his work. Yet, were we to deny the existence of this rival who has usurped part of the divine omnipotence, would we not feel a sense of irreverence as though our faith were challenged? Such a denial would be an admission that we are not only suffering from the greatest hoax perpetrated upon the human race, but that we ourselves have actually created this evil one and have endowed him with the power to harm and destroy us. And after all, have we not, perhaps unwittingly, created a convenient scapegoat for our misdeeds and failings by putting upon an imaginary demon the load of blame for our ignorance and shortcomings? What is the answer to this seeming paradox? If God is all-powerful and all-wise, how is it that he permits this evil or its personification, the devil, to hold such power over men's lives? It is true that we live in a universe in which duality is an established fact. In all manifestation there are pairs of opposite spirit matter, life form, mind body, positive negative, male female, higher lower, heaven earth, even good and evil. The list could be extended indefinitely. These opposites are fundamental to the very existence of being. Man, as a part of this universe, partakes of this duality. The sin, if sin there be, comes, it seems to me, in calling one good and the other evil. On this point we must agree with our Christian Science friends who declare that all is good. Robert Browning wrote, "God's in his heaven. All's right with the world." The world has come to maturity since then. It looks upon such pronouncements as naive and out of tune with the facts of life. What Browning saw was a heaven and earth in which fundamentally everything was good. It is written, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. If we admit that God is the source and author of both spirit and matter, it is presumptuous on our part to call one good and the other evil, or to say that life is of God, while the body flesh is of the devil. For if the body is the temple of the indwelling life or spirit, it cannot of itself be evil. Into this error have fallen those who see in the flesh an enemy, and so mortify and punish the body in order thereby to attain spirituality. If we need proof that there is no basis for the belief that the body is in itself naturally evil or the source of evil, we may look to the animal kingdom. Animals live wholly or almost so in the bodily or physical consciousness, and follow the laws of the flesh, and yet we hardly go so far as to say that an animal has committed a sin. When an animal follows his own group's instincts in his relations with other animals, including humans, it is following the normal laws of its kind. There is no thought of morality or sin. Yet if a man were to follow those same instincts, the sense of morality, the guilt and sin enters the picture. The difference would seem to lie in the fact that man, even the lowest savage, has something which the animal does not. That is the intellectual faculty or the mind principle which enables him to reason, analyze, and discriminate. The faculty, in other words, of knowing good and evil. May we not conclude, therefore, that evil comes into being with the advent of the mind, and that sin is solely the product of man's wrong thinking, feeling, and desiring. There are indeed certain modern schools of thought which hold that evil, and everything which that word might imply, is unreal, save only as it is temporarily brought into existence by man's own erroneous thinking. We might quote from Shakespeare in corroboration of this idea from Hamlet. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And in Proverbs we read, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. This seems to lift our problem out of the physical realm into the mental. St. Paul, writing to the Romans, comes to grips with the problem of sin. What shall we say then, he asks, is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin, but by the law. For without the law sin was dead. We might restate this sentence, for without the law there is no sin, a most significant statement, as we shall see presently. St. Paul goes on, for the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, that is, a union of spiritual and physical. I find then a law that, when I would do good, evil is present with me. But I see another law in my members of the body, warring against the law of my mind spirit, bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members' body. Romans 7:7, 8, 14, 21, 23. What is this law without which sin is dead? This law which is in my members, constantly warring against my mind. There is one law which is beyond and inclusive of all other laws, at least all laws of life and morality, and that is the law of evolution, the law of unceasing progress towards some end towards which all creation moves. This goal can be none other than that of perfection, or completeness of becoming divine. This implies a purpose and a direction. And this, I think, brings us to the key to the problem of evil. In order to get a long-range view of this problem of evil, we must look back to the beginnings of the human race. According to the esoteric teachings, the earliest races were non-physical. That is, they were ethereal in their nature and had not yet come down into physical manifestation. Of these races there is left no trace. The emergence of the first physical man upon our planet occurred unknown millions of years ago. We have reconstructed his likeness from relics found in caves and rock strata. The primary purpose or urge behind this infant humanity was the building of a physical body able to survive the tremendous struggles with his environment. In order to accomplish this, it was necessary for him to develop the qualities of self-preservation. In his struggle for self-preservation and the other primitive urges, it was necessary for him to fight for himself at the expense of all others. It was by putting his strength and cunning and savagery against others that he could not only survive but gain personal power and supremacy. All the crimes known to man were put to his use to accomplish his own ends. Everything which contributed to that end was to him necessary, and therefore good. Should he fail to use these primal instincts, he would cease to exist. Slowly, out of these struggles against the elements of nature and for his survival and supremacy over his own kind, the qualities of feeling and emotion were gradually developed. At first animalistic, the feelings of passion, hate, jealousy, fear, etc., gradually took on mental qualities of cunning, deceit, avarice, selfishness, pride, etc., qualities which even today are building up a keen mind and a strong personality. The trend up to now has been diversity, a going outward from a center, the building of strong and powerful individuality. The point which I want to make is that in the early days of the human race, in fact until comparatively recently, the direction of its evolution has been toward matter, that is, away from spirit. Man has used every energy and force at his command to build up a strong, rugged body and personality. This outward or downward motion is involution or involvement in matter, and the laws therefore which produce and aid that involvement are beneficial. The whole process might be likened to a circle. When it has reached its lowest or midmost point, it reverses its direction and begins to climb upward. That which was in accordance with the divine purpose on the downward arc is opposed to it on the upward arc, and that which is in line with the divine will on the upward arc was opposed to it on the downward. Having reached its lowest or densest enfoldment in matter, humanity now starts its upward climb. Man's direction is now reversed. Until now his law was separateness, self-centeredness, self-assertion, self-possession. A new law comes into being, the law of love and sacrifice, of unity and brotherhood. The direction is now away from matter, toward spirit. What was good for him on his downward journey is now harmful or evil, hence the warring is saint. Paul said, within my members to yield to these downward forces now would be to him a sin. The law of growth is the overcoming of obstructions. This is true in the physical world, and it is equally true in the spiritual world. The athlete struggles with equipment in a gymnasium to develop a strong physical body. Life is like a gymnasium in which every man struggles against the so-called forces of evil, and it is by resisting them, wrestling with them, overcoming them, that he gains spiritual powers. Because spirituality may be gained only by the overcoming of its opposite, materiality, who shall say that these downward pulling forces are in themselves evil? As we contemplate the scheme of God in its entirety, may we not find that what we thought was evil is in the end good because it fulfills its purpose of forwarding our evolution. Good and evil must then be considered as relative terms, a matter really of polarity or direction. What was once beneficial to man's growth and evolution later becomes for him an obstacle, and evil, his sin, would be in yielding to those forces which tend to pull him downward or backward. For his direction is now upward or spiritward. For him, toward matter is evil, toward spirit is good. The whole story, however, is not so simply stated. Several sets of problems arise, and our study of the symbol of evil would be remiss if we failed at least to mention one or two. In its attitude toward religion, and therefore toward evil, the world seems to be divided roughly into two camps. On the one hand, there are those to whom religion is an outward-going thing. Their highest worship is service, and devotion is expressed in acts of mercy. These people regard evil as something to be dealt with. Something must be done about it. The world must be changed. The conditions which breed and nourish evil must be removed. There must be organizations to eradicate evil by the building of institutions of learning, healing, material well-being, etc. There must also be institutions for reclaiming the evil-doer or meting out justice and mercy. We cannot escape the world and its responsibilities. The world's problems are our problems. We are our brother's keeper. Then there are those, and their number is legion, to whom religion is an individual thing and evil is strictly an individual problem, which can be found and rooted out only by searching within the self. The world being material is inherently evil, and to them the body itself is continually at war with their highest aspirations. Man needs must spend so much time and energy trying to overcome the influences of the world and of the flesh that the most desirable state would seem to be that which is free from the world, its problems and responsibilities. His method is to retreat ever within, physically and mentally, and to escape from the demands of the world about him, to find peace and shelter in seclusion and inner communion. For spirit only is the good and the real. Matter is the negation of spirit, and is therefore unreal or an illusion and an enemy to good. Therefore, to deny the body, mortify the flesh, disregard its demands, seek the good by prayer, meditation, fasting, he escapes from earth's prison and finds freedom of pure spirit. His supreme joy comes from detachment from all earthly things and union only with the self, for whatever separates, detracts, or hinders the realization of this union is evil. His feeling for others is toward detachment. Compassion changes to dispassion. He shuts his eyes to others' hardships and his ears to their cries for sympathy. Inwardly, he says, "Let each learn his own lessons and find his own way. Am I my brother's keeper?" By purposely exaggerating these two attitudes, we have emphasized their directions. We know, of course, that each has much of good. One looks outward toward the circumference. The other looks only toward the center. Surely there is a middle ground which embraces both the attitudes. Humanity must realize that it shares the nature of the world even as it shares the nature of spirit. One is its mother even as the other is its father. Who can say that he has no responsibility for the world's evils? Every ugliness is an open challenge to every man. A great sage once wrote, "Inaction in a deed of mercy becomes inaction in a deadly sin." Detachment must be balanced by the idea of unity. Dispassion must be tempered by compassion. On the other hand, the recognition of the evil in the world outside of us must point to the fact that its source and origin lies within our own minds. Each must seek out and destroy the evil in his own consciousness if he would eradicate the evil from the world. In the final analysis, the world problem becomes the individual problem. The one must be identified with the other, the circle absorbed by the point. This realization must ultimately fulfill the design and intent of the symbol of the serpent swallowing its tail.
Thanks for watching the Wisdom Rocker. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.